As I was reading that gospel, I was thinking to myself, gee, why isn't that one of the choices for a marriage wedding mass, right? It would certainly give a warning of what may come down the pike. It was in the mid-19th century. Julian Stulwalki, a Polish poet, took pen to paper and he wrote, "The age to come is an age of discord. There is an empty throne for the Slavic Pope. God rings a massive bell, the clarion call. There is an empty throne for the Polish Pope. So here he comes, the Polish Pope, with the light of God radiating from his face. The world shall bring forth its guns, and he shall bring forth peace, and he shall be the brother to all nations." That poem was written in the middle of the 19th century. It wouldn't be long after that poem that was written that in 1888, St. Don Bosco would have one of his prophetic dreams of the church as a great ship. And the church was under attack, and the Pope was trying to steer the ship between the two pillars of Our Lady and the Eucharist to tie her down when he would be shot and get back up, grab the wheel, and again steer the ship to tie her to the Eucharist and Our Lady. He would go down a second time, and the next Pope would guide the ship to Our Lady and the Eucharist. In Fatima, 1917, the children would see the Pope traveling through a city in ruins, speaking to the dead as he passed through it. He'd reach a tall hill, and there around him would be killed priests and religious and lay people. And eventually, reaching the top of the hill where there was a cross, he too would be shot. All this took place in the late 19th century to the early 20th century of the coming of this Pope. The world would bring forth its guns, and he would bring forth peace. The light of God would come forth from his face. When Karol Wojtyła was just a young boy at 9, he said to his dad, "I want to be a priest." And his father was a military man. He went to work that day, and he said to one of his officers, he said, "My son wants to be a priest. What do I tell him?" And the man said, "Tell him to become a priest. He's going to be Pope someday." When he was 9 years old, not long after that, his mother died. Little Karol Wojtyła had to suffer the loss of his mother, something he never recovered from. You read his poems and you see how much he misses his mother. She died just a month before his first communion. During that time of his suffering, his father took him to the shrine of Our Lady. And there he looked up at the picture of the Blessed Mother, the shrine of Czestochowa, and he said to the Blessed Mother, "You must be my mother now." And from that day forward, he treated the Blessed Mother as his own mother. At the age of 17, he would lose his brother, his hero, his older brother, his idol. And he'd ask his father, teach me to pray. And his father would teach him to pray. At the age of 19, he'd be orphaned when death took his father. And then he immersed himself in prayer. He found the beautiful book by St. Louis de Montfort of true devotion to Mary. And in reading that book, he discovered the depth of the Blessed Mother's love and consecrated himself to her. And from that day forward, he would be hers. Sure, he wanted to be an actor. He wanted to be a playwright. He had all these great dreams, but God had other dreams for him. Dreams that he had no idea what the Lord had prepared for him. Nazism rolled through and began to destroy his culture, his people, his college professors being carted off and killed in the death camps, his own best friend's family, a Jewish boy, his family suffering so much through Nazism, helping Jewish families who would write fake baptismal certificates in order to help them to escape the Nazis. Later, he would have to suffer under communism and began to study for the priesthood. At times, one day, the communists were coming for him. He was down in the basement of the house praying in a small room, and he can hear their boots slamming across the upper floor. He stayed hidden, and thanks be to God, because his life was spared. Young Carroll would be eventually ordained a priest, would travel to his first assignment on the back of an ox cart. He would work with young adults and young people, and he would travel to the mountains with them under communism, under secrecy. He would teach them the catechism and teach them their faith. And he would say that he learned just as much from them as they learned from him. They simply called him uncle, because he had been like an uncle to them. Eventually, his bishop sent him to Rome to get his doctorate degree in theology, of which he got a double doctorate degree in theology and philosophy. But he was such a young priest when he traveled down to San Giovanni Rotondo. He was only about 26 years old when he went to the confessional, confessed his sins to Padre Pio, and Padre Pio looked at him and said, "I see you in white and blood all over your garments. You will become Pope and you will shed your blood for the church." To which the young Carlo Wojtyła responded, "How is that going to happen? I'm Polish." And Padre Pio gave him the finger. Later, as a cardinal, he would write a letter. He would stop by and see Padre Pio again and ask him to pray for a woman who was mother of a family who was very sick and dying. And later he would write a letter to Padre Pio thanking him for visiting the family and healing her. Padre Pio took the letter and gave it to his assistant and said, "Keep this letter, it will be very important one day." And the day came. He came to Rome for the election of Pope John Paul I. Elected him Pope, went back to Poland, and had to quickly pack his bags and turn around and head back to Rome, because Pope John Paul I only lasted 30 days. Our Lady had other plans for who should be Pope. And the bells of St. Peter's rang out. John Paul had already known through the various things that had been told to him by so many people that day would be coming. When he was elected Pope, he dropped to his knees and he said, "Why are you punishing me?" He accepted, and that day he came to the balcony. He suffered so much as a child. His mother's death, his brother's death, his father's death. He saw the most horrible evil that this world had to dish out. He saw the horrors of Nazism, personally saw it. The horrors of communism, personally lived under it. He saw what it did to his country, to his people. He saw the most horrible evils this world could possibly bring out, suffering so much personally. And yet, he came to that balcony, a smiling Pope, with truly the light of God emanating from his face. And for the next 26 years, he would cry out to the world, "Do not be afraid. Coraggio." In 26 years, he would travel 3 times the distance between the earth and the moon, the traveling Pope, as he was often called. The Italians wanted to have a Pope who wasn't Italian because they were so tired of the Italian popes interfering with the Italian church. Then they got a Polish Pope and they're mad at him because he was never home. Constantly traveling, constantly proclaiming the gospel, constantly proclaiming the truth, constantly reaffirming the faith. In the craziness of the 70s, he stopped the bleed in the priesthood, stopped the bleed in religious life, wrote so much, he wrote enough to fit on a library shelf 20 feet long. That's how much he wrote in 26 years, speaking over 50 languages. Truly a gift from God that he could speak to every people in their own tongue. He had the gift of reading souls. I know a young girl who was dragged to World Youth Day, angry that she had to be there, until by chance she happened to be standing by the side of the road, turned around, and John Paul caught her eyes. And this girl who had lived a horrible life of drugs and all kinds of horrible sins She said, in those minutes, he read my soul. He knew everything I'd ever done. And he loved me. It brought about her conversion. Just the simple, simple look of John Paul, which could pierce through any wall. It was amazing. I only know one young person that I'm friends with who did not like John Paul II. Already said his family was fleeing Poland, and they went through Rome, and they stopped in the Vatican Square, and his mother loved the fact that he was a little boy, had this beautiful long hair. And John Paul II came through the square, saw them, he picked up Artie, held him close. He looked at his mother and said, what's your little girl's name? He said, he called me a girl. Whenever you'd bring up St. John Paul II, he'd go, he called me a girl. He would jokingly say it. He loved him so much. All the youth loved him. The largest crowds in recorded history happened when St. John Paul II would come to speak to the youth. Philippines, they lost count after 5 million. Largest crowd in recorded history. Not to sing a singer or a dancer, not to see some sort of great person of great elegance, just to see the Pope. And he said to them what he says to all of them. The Pope loves you. The church needs you. Jesus Christ loves you. Put yourself at the service of the gospel. He was perhaps I'd say Innocent III, the most powerfully political pope in history. He was the one who orchestrated the conversations between Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. He orchestrated the fall of communism. Every Friday at 10 o'clock, Ronald Reagan would pick up the phone and call John Paul. That's why John Paul, he said of John Paul, when Reagan died, John Paul II said, he's the one American president I can call my good friend. Actually, when Ronald Reagan, after he was shot, he went to the Vatican to visit John Paul. Nancy tells the story of meeting with John Paul, and first was very cordial, then John Paul got very serious and said to him, God saved your life and my life. You must help me take down communism. And he spoke about his vocation and his call to be the president that was going to destroy communism. Reagan was shocked, and Nancy was in tears, her makeup running down her face as John Paul told him what his mission was. The line, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, happened because John Paul II said, get real. I can go on forever. For me personally, I miss him more today than any day in the past. What an incredible voice of truth. What an incredible Pope that gave me such hope and such courage. I grew up into John Paul. He was elected when I was 12. I knew no other Pope really other than him. And I truly came to love him. I'd be in those crowds of millions of people. Never forgot that day he just glanced my way. And I just glanced his way. I don't know if he saw me. I think he did. I was in that general vicinity anyway. But that was John Paul. You could be in a crowd of 1 million, and he spoke to you personally. What an incredible Pope, an incredible saint, an incredible man. His simple secret was 2 words, totus tuus. Totus tuus, Maria. Totally yours, Mary. When he designed his shield for Pope, the man who had designed the shields for several popes said, that's not a shield, that's a logo. It was just a simple cross with the M under it. Our Lady beneath the cross. That was his shield. And his simple motto, totus tuus, totally yours, Mary. Everything was hers. What a beautiful life. You know, when he was dying, I was glued to the news, like many of you were. And I was flipping channels between Fox News, MSNBC, NBC, all the news. I was flipping the channels to see what they were saying. And I'm watching one anchor describe and teach about the 5 luminous mysteries of the Rosary. Another anchor speaking about transubstantiation, the Eucharist. They were all teaching the Catholic faith because they had to fill all this time for a whole week while he was dying. And so what they did, they were talking all about John Paul, his encyclicals, his writings. And I thought to myself, only John Paul could use his death to teach the Catholic faith to the entire world while he died. Amazing. He's the one who canonized St. Faustina, gave us the Feast of Divine Mercy. And on the vigil of the Feast of Divine Mercy, he would say his evening prayer, celebrate the Holy Mass in anticipation of Divine Mercy, pray the chaplet. They told him, they said, Holy Father, thousands of young people have filled the square. All the young people have come to pray for you. And he said, I went out and searched for you, and now you have come to me. Thank you. Thank you. After finishing his rosary, he said, let me go to the Father's house. Amen. How beautiful. He ended his life like a prayer, and he went home to the Father's house. The newspapers the next day read, Juanus Paulus, Santo Subito, make him a saint right away, Santo Subito. And it wouldn't be long before he would be canonized and declared a saint of the Church. Only 2 other popes bear the title the Great, and now John Paul II has been easily added to his name the title by popular acclaim, Juanus Paulus Maximus, John Paul the Great. Or if you're from Rhode Island, John Paul the Wickedly Awesome. It's funny, when he took the name John Paul, he signed the letter with a J. And they said, there's no J in Latin. And he said, there is now. I'm the Pope. Today, more than ever, I miss him. Whenever I go to Rome, I stand at his grave and I cry. His clarity, his strength, his courage. How I long for the days of John Paul in the midst of the confusion we're in right now. But I'll have to be quiet about that today because he would not me to say the things I want to say. Today, my brothers and sisters, we celebrate one of the greatest saints of the 20th and 21st century. A man who truly shed his blood for the Church on the feast of Our Lady of Fatima at 5:13 p.m. A man who truly suffered for the sake of the Church. A man who truly was a giver of hope. God rang a clarion, a massive bell, a clarion call. There was a throne for a Polish pope. The world brought forth its guns, and he brought forth peace. The light of God emanated from his face, and he truly was the brother to all nations. May God bless us again with such a pope. May God bless you, and Mary keep you.